Hey there creative people, today I'm pulling back the curtain and showing you how I bring my pattern designs to life. I'll be using Procreate and Adobe Illustrator to create this wildflower pattern, and I'll be chatting about my process along the way. Hi, I'm Mel Armstrong, a surface pattern designer and illustrator from Wellington, New Zealand, and on this channel I provide tutorials and advice for illustrators and surface pattern designers. So I've started out with a canvas that is a 12 by 12 inch size square, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab one of my templates. Now I have a pack here that you can purchase, I'll leave the link below, that has all these layout templates. So I'm going to use my OG template, and let's just choose a dark color and just tap that in there and then fit to canvas. And I'm just going to use this as a guide to lay out my pattern and sketch my pattern. I'm going to change my color to just a different color to my template here as well, and then pick a pencil. So for today's pattern, I'm just going to sketch out a pattern in Procreate on my iPad, but I'm actually going to create the pattern in Adobe Illustrator. So later on I'll show you how I take that into Adobe Illustrator and color it in there, and also compose the pattern. But I start out in here because I like the feel of sketching in Procreate, and you could obviously do this in Illustrator, but this is my preference. You could also do it on paper and then take it into Illustrator. It's just however you like to sketch. And so for my flower shapes, I'm going to use this guide here called the Flower Color Guide, and I'll leave a link below for that as well. This has some really great photos of just flowers, and what I like to do is just take the basic shape of a flower, and then I will use that as my flower in my illustration. I don't put any details. I might put a few little tiny details, but basically I just like to get the shape and use the shape for these sorts of illustrations. There's nothing too realistic. It's all very abstract and simplistic. So this is a great book just to find those different shapes along the way. So I'm just going to speed this up and start sketching in my flowers. I think the other nice thing about sketching in Procreate is that it allows me to move things around. So if I want to adjust things, it's just easy to cut and paste rather than having to rub it out and then start again. As you can see, this is very rough. Sometimes I will then refine it to make it a bit more refined. Sometimes I will just take this into Illustrator or Photoshop or just on Procreate itself and just go straight to color. So I've got an image up on the screen to show you the inspiration for each of these flowers and just how much I make them completely different, really. I just simplify them and make them really simplistic with not a lot of detail. And quite often when I get to the color stage, I'll add even a little bit more detail, just depending on the balance of the whole piece. The other nice thing about sketching in Procreate is I can zoom in quite close, I can turn it and twist it, which is something I found really helpful now that I'm getting a bit older and my eyes don't work so well. So zooming in is really handy for getting up close and personal, which I can't do on a piece of paper. So yeah, I'm loving that. I like to do little clusters as well in between everything, and quite often at the end I'll come back and I'll just add a few fillers. These could be dots or just little shapes just to fill any gaps. I want this to look like a the wildflower field, so like lots of different colours and flowers and leaves, and yeah, just a mix of lots of things, but all very closely packed together. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. I think when I take it into Illustrator and start colouring it, I will probably add a few more texture kind of dots or marks just to fill in some of the gaps that I can see, but I'm going to leave that till I take it into Illustrator. So if I turn off that background, you can see I've got that shape there, which is going to repeat really nicely in Illustrator using the pattern tool. So I'll show you how to do that when I get into Illustrator. But yep, I'm going to send this over and open it up in Illustrator and then start colouring all my motifs. Before we dive into the next stage of this pattern tutorial, I just want to have a quick chat about creativity and how I use Skillshare, who are the sponsors of this video, to overcome creative block. I used to think creativity was something you either had or you didn't, but what if it's more like a muscle, something you can build and strengthen with practice? That's why I love Skillshare. They're all about making learning accessible and fun. Whether you're looking to pick up a new skill or dive deeper into your passion, Skillshare has got it all. Skillshare offers a range of categories including design, art and illustration, photography, music and audio, productivity. Within each of these categories there are a bunch of subcategories, which makes it really easy to find the skill you're looking to learn. I've been using it to learn new editing techniques so I can improve these videos, as well as keeping up my drawing skills with classes like this one by Lisa Bardot called Kickstart Your Creativity, which really helps to build those creative muscles. I love how it's focused on mini drawing tutorials that focus on themes like weather, clothing, flowers and people. If you're ready to flex your creative muscles, definitely check it out. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. That's a lot of time and there are a lot of classes, so to help you get the maximum benefit for your free trial, why not start out with 2 of my latest classes, Floral Patterns and Gouache and How to Find Clients to License Your Artwork. And now let's get back to the tutorial. Okay, so I've pulled my design into Illustrator and I'm going to create a new document, and I want this to be a 12 by 12 inch, 300 dpi, and I'm just going to grab my sketch and just drag it over into my new document, and I can reduce the size of that as well to 12 by 12 inches, just so it'll fit nicely, and then center that as well. So what I like to do is use my iPad as the tablet to draw on. So what I'm going to do is connect it over to my iPad. Now when doing this, I like to use a cable. You can do this via Bluetooth, but I find that it does cut out quite a bit, and so I do recommend using either the USB that came with your iPad, or I use a Thunderbolt because I find that's the most reliable and stable connection to use. So when I'm doing this, I use a combination of my mouse and keyboard for the shortcuts, and then I use my Apple Pencil here to colour. And so at the moment I've got my sketch layer, and I'm going to create another layer and put it behind that one, or at the bottom. And then I might lower the opacity of the sketch layer. So if I just go into properties and then just bump that down, just so I can still see it, but it's not too offensive. And then I'll lock that so that I don't accidentally move it. So on this layer I can start colouring in, and to do this I'm going to use the blob brush, and the blob brush, which is Shift plus B, is my favourite drawing tool in Illustrator. So I will use that with my Apple Pencil to colour in. So first off, I better go get a swatch. So I'm just going to remove these ones here that default when you create a new document, and then I'm going to bring in one that I've already created here, and then I can start colouring. So let's start with this big branch here, and I'm using my blob brush and my iPad, and then you can create that lovely smooth line. And as you can see, I'm not really following the sketch completely, which is fine, and I might make little adjustments as I go. The sketch really was just for a guide, and then I will bring it to life in Illustrator. Once I've created the outlines like that, if I use the A for direct selection tool and click on the inside, it'll select the inside area, and then I can hit delete, sometimes a couple of times, and it will fill that area and create it as one object. So I'm just going to go around and delete those. There's lots of ways you can draw in Illustrator, and this is just one way, which is my preferred way. And then let's just turn that sketch off. There's a couple of little bumps in here that I want to smooth out. So to do that, I'm going to use the smooth tool, which is this little tool here. And I've created a shortcut for that because I use it a lot. And then if you say select it and then hit the smooth tool, I can then smooth out these bumps. You also get this little adjustment tool here, so if I move that up, it's going to smooth it out, but just be careful with that because sometimes it can just go a little bit too far. And if it's not smoothing out that well, you can always just grab the little anchor points here and adjust them as well. So I'm going to do that and just smooth that out a bit more. So I just like to check over, just see if there's any other little bits that I think are too juttery, and that's how I smooth it out. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. And then another thing I want to do is to add these little lines in the middle of the leaves, and the way I like to do that is I will select it and then go over to the draw inside, which is Shift D, and then that way when I draw it's going to be clipped to the branches. So for this one I'm going to choose a lighter colour, stick with my blob tool, maybe just reduce the size and draw in my little lines. As you can see, I'm making this really simplistic because This is going to be quite small scale, so I don't want to overcomplicate it with lots of detail because they will get lost, and just make it a little bit more of an eyesore. So the simplistic the better when creating these little designs, ditzy designs, I guess. They will be quite small. And then I can just click out, and if we turn off the sketch again, you can see it has kept it within the boundaries of those leaves. All right, I'm just going to continue on and colour the rest of this. I also like to group everything, so I'm just going to select the top of those orange flowers and then the bottom, and that will select all of them in the layer, and then I can group them. And then I'm also going to group it to the stem as well. So basically each motif will have its own group. You can label them as well. I get a bit lazy sometimes, but actually that's more of a branch, isn't it? And let's name this one Red Flowers. It is good practice to label them all. I do get a bit lazy and don't do it, but if I am handing this over to a client and they want the Illustrator file, it is nice to hand over a nicely organized file for them. So try to label them and keep them organized like this, and you'll keep everyone happy. Okay, now it is time to create my pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all of those and I'm going to go up to Object, Pattern Make. And at the moment it's just doing it as a standard grid, but I want to change this to a brick by either row or column type pattern. So to do that, over here in the pattern options, I'm going to try the brick by row, which moves them over so they're going to be in line with the middle of each of those. And then I am going to change the height to 6, and that will bump it down. And let's just set the width to 12 just to start it off, so it's the width of the actual artboard as well. So I can see a few little overlaps that I need to fix, some gaps. So what I might do is just bump it out a little bit with the width, and then maybe the height. So that spreads it out a little bit, and what I can do is fill in some of these gaps, and I want to do it while I'm still in here. So I'm going to jump into this area here, and I'm just going to randomly create some motifs, maybe some little flowers. And as you can see, it has populated it on the repeat. So there's still a couple of other little gaps I want to fill in, so I will go and fill them in as well. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So I am going to now click Done. And what that's done is added the pattern to my swatches panel. So if I move across here, and let's use the rectangle tool to draw out, let's just actually put it on a new layer first, and then drag out a rectangle, and then let's fill that with the pattern. And it needs a background, so at the moment it doesn't have a background. So what I'll do is I'll grab that same layer and duplicate it by dragging it onto the plus sign, select the bottom one and give it a background color. And I think I like the light version, this one here. So now we have our pattern, and that's looking pretty good. It looks like a wild field of wildflowers. One last thing I would do is to actually create the repeat tile extract so that you can export it out of Illustrator and use it for something like a print-on-demand website, or just to send to a client if they need a step and repeat pattern. So to do that, what I do is it's just move down here. I'm going to grab the swatch and drag it out onto the workplace here. And you can see the inner square here, that's the actual repeat tile. So we want to isolate that and export it. So to do that, I'm going to select it. You can either try and select it using your direct selection tool, or if you actually go into the group, it'll be the very bottom layer. So you can then select that. Now there's a couple of things I want to do with this. I want to turn this into an artboard, so that will allow us to export it. And I also want to create the background layer as well. So I'm going to duplicate that. And this one I am going to use as our artboard. So I'm going to go keep it selected and go to Object, Artboards, Convert to Artboards. So now it's all on an artboard that can be exported. And then let's create another duplicate of that bounding box there and make sure it's still selected, and then I can apply my background layer. So now I can export that. I just go to File, Export, and this is going to be second artboard. The first artboard was the original design. So if you go to your artboards panel, you can see I've just got the 2 artboards. So all you want to do is export that second artboard. So go to File, Export, Export As. And in here we want to select Use Artboards, and then the range you want to select number 2. And then I'm going to export it as a JPEG. You could also export it as a PNG. It really is up to you. And then click Export. And then you want to make sure you save it as a 300 dpi, or if you're uploading it to Spoonflower, I would go with the 150. Also make sure the Art Optimized is selected, not the text or the type. And make sure that is on maximum as well, and then click OK. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed that little behind the scenes look into me creating a pattern. I used a combination of Procreate for the sketch, and then I completed it in Adobe Illustrator. Sometimes I will do it all in Procreate, but when I am designing for a client, I like to make sure that it's finished off well, so I will finish it off in either Photoshop or Illustrator, depending on the style of the pattern. If it's got lots of textures, then I typically would do it in Photoshop. If it's a flattish design like this without many textures, then Illustrator is pretty good for that. And the good thing about Illustrator is that I can scale this as much as I want, and it won't become pixelated, whereas in Photoshop you do get those issues. But there are some little ways you can get around those. Just check out some of my Photoshop tutorials to discover some of those. Now, if you do want to learn a little bit more about surface pattern design, I have a course called The Art and Joy of Surface Pattern Design, which takes you right through everything from the creative, the technical and the business side of the industry, and you will learn from the very basics right through to very complex patterns, as well as how to approach clients, how to deal with contracts, all that kind of stuff. So check it out. I'll leave the link below. Also, if you want to check out another Illustrator tutorial, I suggest having a look at this one here.